Communism, dictatorship, occupation, and war left Kosovo as the poorest and the most underdeveloped country in Europe. In the wake of the 21st century, more than 2 million people in Kosovo had to start their lives from the beginning, without homes, money, or even their loved ones. In 1999 through 2001, Kosovo received unprecedented help from the Western world, which lent financial and logistical assistance through the emergency and reconstruction phases. During these phases, conditions for what was to follow after 2001 were created, conditions for development. This documentary will speak about this time, how it started, and how it is happening, the creation of a new Kosovo. This documentary will walk us through the process of building democracy through grassroots advocacy. After the war, in 1999, the United Nations mission in Kosovo, UNMIK, was established as an interim administrative mission with military support from KFOR, the NATO peacekeeping troops. The aim of UNMIK and KFOR was to ensure the establishment of stable self-governance in this troubled southeastern European province. As a first step, the first ever democratic elections in Kosovo were held. First, local elections in 2000, and then parliamentary elections in 2001. This enabled Kosovar people to run for office and be elected for state institutions. They also received some governing responsibilities from the international administration.
USAID strategically waited until the programs, the service programs, and humanitarian programs were completed by the international community before getting involved directly with the NGO community. What this means is that in 1999, you had over 500 international organizations that came to Kosovo. Most of them came in here and landed in Pristina, where they funded any type of NGO, so-called NGO. The Kosovo NGO Advocacy Project requested actually a program that took the NGOs away from service to issue-driven organizations. What does this mean? That means actually transferring the NGOs from job opportunities, which most of them were, to actually organizations that had a civic responsibility, specifically in advocating or holding their government accountable or their elected officials. This was a big challenge for us. So what we did was we decided in order to cover the entire territory to set up a foundation that had Western standards in the western part of Kosovo, and specifically in Jakova, and also obviously establish a training resource center in Pristina responsible for the eastern section. So we provide both grant-giving opportunities and training in order to bring the best to the local organizations and moving them from service to issue-driven organizations.
Para fillimit të implementimit të projektit KNAP, mund thuhet lirisht nocioni vetëm.
Before the implementation of KNAP project, we can say that the term advocacy was not well known. While after the implementation of this important program, we can say that at least in every Kosovo municipality, there's an NGO that has high capacities in doing advocacy work in Kosovo.
True. There were only 2 or 3 cases of non-governmental organizations, NGOs, or civic groups trying to influence decision-making at the central or the local level. Now, after 3 years of the Kosovo NGO Advocacy Project, KNAP, there are around 60 NGOs from all around Kosovo that have undertaken at least one advocacy campaign at the local or the central level of government. We will visit some of these NGOs to see what they're doing now. How have they evolved throughout KNAP? How have they become real actors of change with the help of KNAP funds, trainings, and information programs? In this market, individual farmers buy and sell their livestock. Many of the animals that are sold here are taken just across the motorway to be butchered in the open, without any protection from contamination. This makes food poisoning, and especially meat poisoning, a very common occurrence in Kosovo. Seeing a friend of his suffered from meat poisoning, Ismet Sufi, the director of the Kosovo Development Center, decided to research this problem.
During the talks that we had with the Jakova hospital, we saw that there were more than 400 cases of food poisoning during the first 6 months of the year. We visited the municipal authorities, the chief executive officer, and the 3 departments.
The municipality had no regulation in place that ensured the meat was safe for consumers to eat. In order to tackle the problem, Mr. Isufi received advocacy trainings from ATRC and applied to FDI for an advocacy grant. The grant was approved. Then, KDC started building citizens' awareness of this issue through posters, meetings, debates, and through the media. They used Radio Jakova, a local radio station, for call-in shows. There, they made doctors and vets available for listeners to consult on food safety before starting work on drafting the regulation.
We created a working group of 7 qualified people from the University of Pristina, veterinarians, technology and law experts, who were very experienced in this field. The working group wrote a draft regulation, which we submitted to the municipal assembly. They approved it by an absolute majority in 2003.
The regulation is now in place, and it includes all the procedures involving animal slaughtering, including a range of disciplinary measures to be taken in case of non-compliance with sanitary procedures, with the ultimate aim of protecting the consumer. Separate fines in the regulation range from 250 to 2,500 euros.
Food products, it's not good that they are putting them on the sides of the street, because they get dust. Then some wash them, some don't, and infections can occur.
The quality of food is a real issue here in Kosovo. It is very common in Kosovo for food stores to display their products on the street, exposed in the sun and dust. Funded by KNAP, a local NGO, Our Future, in Soreka, implemented a project to address this issue.
The main goal of the project was to prevent displaying of food products in the sun and dust, which is an obvious occurrence in the streets of Kosovo.
First, the NGO partnered with a local TV station to educate citizens about the problem. Interviews with citizens, food producers, and expert debates on the issue were used to push for the regulation that the NGO drafted. The regulation was submitted to 3 municipalities.
In Jakova, the municipal assembly approved the regulation in April 2003, with the implementation starting in May, while in Soreka, the implementation started around the middle of May.
While Jakova and Soreka approved the regulation, its implementation is rather slow, with municipal inspectors only taking sporadic actions. In Prizren, the municipality has yet to approve the regulation. Driving away from Soreka, we see many sites where cars or other waste were dumped in nature. The lack of rules and procedures for protecting the environment at the central and local level make littering a common occurrence in many places around Kosovo, especially on the sides of the road. However, when we drove across Dechan municipality, planning to get some footage of the waste that would demonstrate this problem, we couldn't find any dumped cars or other solid waste. We later learned that the authorities have cleared the entire municipality of metal waste that was dumped outside of official dumping and treatment sites. This was done after the Municipal Assembly passed a regulation entitled Regulation on Inert Waste, which was drafted by a local organization called the Association of Independent Intellectuals. This project was a result of a FDI environmental grant that they had received.
First, we did research in the field. Then we engaged our experts in drafting the municipal regulation on inert waste. We didn't limit ourselves only to metal waste, but focused in general on all inert waste.
The regulation was adopted, and it required the municipal authorities to clear the municipality of waste. Adem Lushai says that the regulation has been partially implemented, and that they are going to continue to monitor the work of the municipal authorities on this issue. Similar to what Adem Lushai and his organization have done in Dechan, we will now go to eastern Kosovo, to Viti. There we visit Emrush Ezimi from NGO Elita. Emrush wanted to do something about the problem of solid waste in his region. He wanted to push the municipal authorities to establish solid waste management rules and procedures where they didn't exist, and implement the existing ones. He saw this as a way to prevent this phenomenon from happening.
We applied to FDI with a project on solid waste management in the Gjilan region, or 5 municipalities of southeast Kosovo. First, we researched the situation with waste management and the legislative framework. From this research, we learned that out of 5 municipalities, 3 had regulations and 2 did not.
Viti, Kamenica, and Ferazaj had regulations and needed monitoring. NGO Elita established very good working relations with the municipal inspectors there and started monitoring the implementation of the regulations. In Gjilan and Kaçanik, Elita helped the authorities in drafting them.
The regulations in Gjilan and Kaçanik have both been approved, and now they are being implemented properly, while at the same time we monitor their implementation.
These regulations have made the authorities more effective in keeping the environment clean and healthy in this region. Kosovar society is a patriarchal society, and women still don't have many of the opportunities that they enjoy in the developed world. The stereotype that women are born to be housewives is very much present here. Domestic violence was also present in Kosovo earlier, but it wasn't reported that much. The Women's Wellness Center has undertaken numerous significant actions in Pea on this issue. Some of the results were the creation of a safe house for victims of domestic violence and the establishment of the Intersector Network to address the problem. As part of an FDI grant, the center has pushed for the approval of guidelines that would help police officers, social workers, and NGO activists during their first encounter with victims of domestic violence. The majority of them know what this draft includes. They have a copy of the draft and try to comply with it. But my idea was, to apply this draft at the Kosovo level. So often we have seen the first mistakes made while working with the victims of domestic violence are made right there during the first encounter. The draft guidelines haven't yet been adopted, but the Women's Wellness Center continues to educate police officers and social workers how to treat properly victims of domestic violence. Contributing even further to domestic violence are poverty, unemployment, lack of education, lack of basic living conditions, and numerous other problems that are a part of many Kosovars' daily lives. In a suburban neighborhood of Ferizaj, in central Kosovo, these problems are more than evident for almost everybody living here. It is a neighborhood called Dubrav, which is inhabited by the Ashkali ethnic minority. The Ashkali minority have been identified with the Roma population throughout history. Now, Ashkali have defined themselves as a new nation, hoping that they will not suffer the neglect that they have suffered through the years, no matter the regime. In Dubrav, we find that there's much more than just hope. There's the Ashkali organization called People's Voice, which is making a worthwhile effort to influence decision-making by hearing and meeting their community's needs. One of the NGO's biggest successes came from their advocacy work towards the construction of a sewage system in their neighborhood.
We have identified this problem as very important due to the high number of people with diseases related to poor hygiene. We applied for a grant from FDI that would enable us to push for constructing a new sewage system.
The result was tremendous. 200 houses were connected to the new sewage system, and this new street was paved.
The central government allocated 181,000 euros for construction of the sewage system in 2 Ashkali neighborhoods.
Another big problem, worsened by Kosovo's poor economic situation, is the participation of people with disabilities in public life.
Niveli I përjashtimit persona me aftësi të kufizuar në pjesëmarrje në shoqërinë kosovare ka qenë shumë I lartë. Një prej shkaktarëve më të
We saw that people with disabilities were very often excluded from participating in Kosovar society. One of the main reasons were the physical obstacles that hindered freedom of movement for people with disabilities in Kosovo. In this aspect, we had the fortune and the pleasure to apply at FDI for a project that was named Free Access for All. The main objectives of the project were to, first, increase the awareness of people that deal with spatial planning policies in Kosovo. Second, offer information to the public on the obstacles that exist and how to avoid them. And third, was encouraging people with disabilities to learn about these standards and become advocates against physical obstacles in support of an environment with free movement for Kosovo citizens.
Hanikos has successfully advocated for provisions on access for persons with disabilities within the law on construction.
Sada radimo sa organizacijom FDA na jednom novom projektu kako da zbližimo.
Now we are working with FDI on a new project, how to get Serbs and Albanians closer, the two main communities. We want to see what are the problems bothering both and then get the people together through discussions on any issue, a free topic. Now, it's still hard because the situation is still tense among the Serb community, but we will try through all municipal bodies to reduce the problem to the minimum. Our committee does monitoring of all municipal assembly and central government committees to see how they meet the needs of the Serbian population upon return. It's not only about return, but also other issues that the committees deal with that concern the community. We try in a democratic way to tell them how to do certain things. I have to say that the committees take into account all our remarks. We are somewhat happy with the results. The only thing we are not happy with is the level of the return. Reviewing of the draft regulation on implementation of statutory provisions of Vitja municipality on public consultation and participation. A proposal that came from NGO Elita. First, we saw that citizens of the Deccan municipality were not informed adequately on their rights, or at least their rights weren't regulated through a special regulation that allowed for their access in the local administration's work. We started our own project on this issue, seeing how a similar regulation proved very successful in the neighboring municipality of Đakova. I think that we have managed to offer Dečan municipality citizens, as well as its officials, a regulation that defines citizens' rights in relation to the municipal assembly and many other rights, which didn't exist before.
After the NGO's successes with the public participation in decision-making regulation in Đakova and Dečan, Emrush Azimi from Elita NGO is presenting the draft regulation on public participation to the municipal assembly members for their approval. The regulation was approved on the first voting.
Now the citizen has the right to participate in decision-making, has the right of access to official documents, and many other rights according to the deadlines set in the regulation. I think that in the future we need to continue public awareness raising on the contents of the regulation. At the same time, we need to advocate and apply pressure on municipal officials to create the necessary mechanisms for the regulation's implementation. Because we see that there's either lack of will or lack of knowledge from their side. I think that in the future, in coalition with other NGOs, we can push the municipal officials to implement the regulation.
Fundamental to citizens increasing their participation in political decision-making is the electoral system itself. As we have learned in Kosovo, a closed-list electoral system where citizens vote for a party and do not have a clear geographical representation, citizens do not know whom to hold accountable. Therefore, a coalition of more than 200 NGOs started a campaign to change the electoral system to an open-list system.
Kosovo's election system should have open lists, ensure geographical representation, gender representation, and minority representation. Each assembly member would have a reason for approaching citizens and asking them for their vote. For one, a rapport would be created between citizens and their representatives. Then, citizens would ask for accountability from their representatives.
The Reforma 2004 coalition involved citizens in pressuring UNMIK to change the law through peaceful protests and public demonstrations. Although UNMIK refused to change the current system for this election, citizens are now more aware of the proposed changes. Organizing is already underway for changing the electoral system for the 2006 local elections. Since the first Kosovar elections in 2000, voter turnout has fallen from 79% to 54%. High unemployment, a poor economy, and uncertainty regarding Kosovo's future led to a legitimate fear that voter turnout would not reach 50% for the fall 2004 parliamentary elections. This would leave Kosovo with a legal, though not credible, government. Many members of civil society were concerned about the political instability that low voter turnout could cause. Therefore, more than 75 organizations united in a Kosovo-wide effort to get out the vote for the October 2004 parliamentary elections. This involved a media campaign and 2,222 volunteers in a door-to-door effort that aimed to reach every house in Kosovo with the Get Out the Vote message. Don't complain, vote. this one of the largest volunteer efforts since 1999, but the campaign successfully contributed to more than 50% of Kosovars going out to vote. The result was tremendous due to the Kosovo-wide networking on this issue. In 2002, the NGOs that were involved in the initial stages of KNAP formed an advocacy network called AVOCO. In the first 2 years, the network was involved in advocating for the parliamentary committee meetings to be open to the public, and worked on the drafting and adoption of the Freedom of Information Act. Although very successful, after these 2 campaigns, AVOCO became idle. In 2004, AVOCO decided to reunite, or even create a new coalition if needed. Therefore, KNAP invited an American expert, Mr. Craig Coletta, to help AVOCO in organizing itself into a vibrant NGO coalition.
There are at least 3 major benefits to forming this sort of a network. The first, and probably the greatest, is that the advocacy organizations in this network can learn from each other. They can share each other's strengths, learn from each other's experiences, and improve the work that they do on their individual missions. Secondly, a network provides a single point for donors to give funds, rather than giving funds to 1 or 2 of a dozen or 24 organizations. They can give funds to the network itself, and the network can distribute those funds to its membership. Third, in the event of a crisis situation, a network allows for faster mobilization of response. Once again, show of hands, reaching consensus. The proposal is that AVOCO's vision statement is, in a changing society, AVOCO gives citizens a stronger voice in decision-making. Hands? Motion passes. AVOCO has a vision statement. And we can take a coffee break.
Now, Kosovars face the challenge of fulfilling standards, a set of benchmarks put in place by the international community, which will open the door to talks regarding Kosovo's final political status. Active participation from citizens will be crucial in Kosovo's efforts to meet these standards. With this in mind, KNAP is proud for the role it has played in encouraging and empowering citizens to participate in making key decisions that affect their lives by bringing out the advocate in everyone.